This is the Real Footy Podcast. Thanks for joining us to tip round 6. My name's Andrew Wu and I'm joined by the 8-tip king, Pete Ryan. Pete, glad to see you made it back from gather round in one piece. Some talk you had to fight off the masses after getting 8 tips on the weekend. Is that correct? You were the most popular man in Adelaide?
Well, it would be correct. I actually have tipped Adelaide both weeks that I've got 8 tips, but I'm a perfectionist, so 9 tips is the only thing that will really make me happy, so I'm gunning for that. And the other thing to say about that is I'm not sure I was fighting off the masses. I was more disturbing people when I was walking around yelling out, I got 8, I got 8, I got 8 throughout Adelaide and onto the plane. It was a bit of a loose moment for me, but I was pretty excited to do it back to back. It was like winning the Cox Plate in the Melbourne Cup.
Well, you're firing in April, and you're in the lead in our tipping competition.
That's a subtle whack, isn't it? You're firing in April. I know that's like saying March premiers, isn't it?
But in tipping, actually, they all matter whether you tip one in
Correct.
April or August. You don't get extra points.
Correct.
But anyway, Pete's in the lead on 31, followed by Jake, Niall and John Pierrick on 30. So they're on the podium at the moment. We've got a bit of work to do to catch up. I won't mention where I am.
Where are you, Willie?
I can't scroll down far enough. First game of the round, Fremantle against the Western Bulldogs, kicking off Friday night footy in Perth.
Well, this is actually a tough one to kick off because logically you think the home team Freo, but Bulldogs have probably been, let's face it, they're equally disappointing, these two teams, so it's a really tough tip. Fremantle just got out of jail against Gold Coast. I'm backing them in to get a bit of momentum out of that win. 2 weeks on the road, consecutive weeks on the road for Bulldogs is always difficult, and Fremantle's defence is a really good, or it is basically their strength. So I think they'll be able to, basically set up a wall there and score enough to beat the Bulldogs.
Yeah, this is a hard tip.
Mm.
I think I'm going with Freo only because it's at home. But the Dogs were okay last week against Port.
They were
in it in difficult conditions against a parochial crowd.
Yep.
I thought there was a lot of merit in their performance. But losing Josh Bruce and no Bailey Smith, I think that hurts. But I think they went straight to Perth after Adelaide. I think that week together might do them good.
Well, they showed in that 2021 that it was actually great for them being on the road, and they were really a team that bonded. Last year, however, Fremantle got them at Optus Stadium in that first week of the finals when they had a commanding lead, the Bulldogs. So, look, I'm just going with the home team. There's not a lot of other rationale. They're equally okay to this point, but they need the win to get their season going, and I think the Dockers will do it at home.
Yeah, I can see a point in the Friday night press conference where Luke Bear-Ridge talks about, the week together really brought the boys together.
Yeah.
And I'll think of that when I've missed the tip.
I love your sitting on the fence. I tipped Freo, but I can really see the Bulldogs winning. It's getting nauseating for our listeners, mate.
For the record,
you got
I'm tipping Fremantle.
Yeah.
I'm tipping Fremantle. First game on Saturday afternoon, we go back to Adelaide for Port Adelaide against West Coast. Can you make a case for West Coast at all?
No, they're the most disappointing club in the competition. And really, they're not really part of the competition at the moment because they're playing with so few players they've got so many injuries, basically. They've been ruled out, and it was always going to be a bit of a tough year for them anyway, but with so many players out, I see Will Schofield, their former premiership player, is going to line up for their waffle team. That's how desperate they are for players.
They lost by about 30 goals last week, didn't they?
Yeah.
Seconds,
Yeah, so Port Adelaide, you just pencil that in and think, well, at least I've got one for the week.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think Port Adelaide win that one. The second game on Saturday afternoon, we go to Canberra for Greater Western Sydney against the Brisbane Lions. The Lions have got a very good record against the Giants recently. How do you see it?
Well, the Lions were pretty good. I know North Melbourne weren't, they got a reality check on the weekend. But the Brisbane Lions have taken a lot, I reckon, out of that loss to the Bulldogs. And they've really started, their form since then's been pretty good. They'll go down to the Giants, who will probably feel like a team that's in the bottom 8 teams in the competition for this year. Battled to get over Hawthorn. It was only really Himmelberg that actually helped them do that. So you'd have to tip Brisbane.
Yeah, I noticed Adam Kingsley said during the week they want to turn Canberra back into a fortress, because it was a fortress for the Giants under Leon Cameron. There was a point in 2016 or 18 where they won 9 in a row. But they've lost their last 7 there. So,
is that right? So it's been a porous fortress.
Well, it's not a fortress.
It's not a fortress. It's an old crumbled fortress like, you'd go and see somewhere in some country, like Port Arthur. It's basically Port Arthur. And it needs to become, I don't know, the Canberra jail.
But yeah, well, to our tips, back on subject here.
Yeah.
I think Brisbane win this. Brisbane are starting to play the sort of footy that we thought they would at the start of the year, and although they only beat North last week, I think North are a bit better than they were last year, and they did have 30, 40 scoring. 40 scoring
They took
shots?
25 marks off 25 marks inside 50, and the Giants have not. I wouldn't think that their defence aerially is their biggest strength. So the thing with Brisbane, if they beat you out of the centre, they'll thrash you. If you can break even in the middle, you're half a chance of being competitive. But I think Brisbane will still be too good.
Yeah, I'm going with the Lions. Saturday night footy, we see a rematch of the grand final. Geelong against the Swans out at was it GMHBA Stadium now it's called?
Yep. What do they call it? Pork Barrel Park, the locals call it, because it's got so much government funding. This is a tough game to predict. I would actually have tipped Sydney, except for their injuries. Rampy still aren't likely to be unavailable. McCartans are both out. So that makes it really difficult. Geelong's ability to defend turnover has been really poor this year, and that gives Sydney a chance because they're really good with the turnover game. Again, I'm just going for the home team, although Sydney's won, I think, 3 of their last 4 at GMHBA Stadium.
4 of the last 5, actually.
Is that right?
Yeah, they go well there.
Yeah, but Geelong with Cameron, Hawthorn starting to get a bit of form going, Brad Close, they'll win. And they're raising the flag, premiership flag, so those sort of nights can inspire you to victory.
It's a bit odd doing it, though, when you're 2 and 3, round 6. Just doesn't have the same panache, does it, as round 1.
No.
I give the Swans a chance. I think they'll be very competitive, but I get the feeling maybe last week when they had their sort of backs to the wall moment against an equally undermanned team in Richmond, and then this week, I still don't know where to put Geelong though. I mean, they've had 2
I agree.
easy kills against Hawthorn on West Coast, where they probably did it and played 25, 30 minutes of good footy.
100%.
I don't think they'll be able to do that against Sydney. I think they'll have to play better for longer.
Sydney are really well coached, and they've got a good depth. It's just the wrong sort of players all in the one area.
Yeah, all
lost.
their tools.
Yeah.
And you'd think at some point, if it's close, Tom Hawkins or Jeremy Cameron will make the most of their matchups. So, yeah, I think we're both tipping Geelong here, aren't we?
Absolutely.
Sunday footy takes us to Tasmania and Hawthorn against the red-hot team of the competition, Adelaide. Can you see the Hawks causing an upset?
Only because it's at Launceston, you give them some chance of being competitive. But I think Adelaide are in too good form, too much to play for. I stood behind the goals on the hill, actually, at the Adelaide Oval and watched that first quarter when they kicked 8 out of 9 goals, and it was pretty spectacular to sit there and just have the ball come in around your shoulder a couple of times during that quarter. They looked really slick, and their forward line is dynamic. They've got 5 or 6 players who are genuine goal-scoring players, goal sneaks, and they'll be too good for Hawthorn.
How good a player is Jordan Dawson now? I mean, he was a very good player at the Swans, but he's taken his game to another level at Adelaide, which is surprising given that he went from a good team to a side that was battling a bit. But
his kicking is brilliant, and he has surprised me. I didn't think he was that good a player, and even when he was made captain, I was thinking, really, geez, that doesn't say a lot about the Crows' leadership. But apparently he walked in the club and said, I want to be a leader here. So he was magnificent to watch, actually, the way he kicked on Thursday night and just penetrated Carlton's defence. The only thing I would say, if I was Mitchell, I'd be putting someone to lock him down because he hasn't got a lot of great ball users around him in the middle. So if you can stop his penetration, you'll make life a lot harder, and hopefully bring Sicily and Sam Frost into the game as intercept markers.
Yeah, he's that rare bit of class in a real sort of honest blue-collar midfield. I think it'll be a tough game for Adelaide. I think that they'll go into this game as the hunted, whereas I think they were the hunter last week with a red-hot crowd. And they ambushed Carlton, whereas I think Hawthorn will see it coming. They're honest, the Hawks, in patches, and I think when they put in the application like they did against the Giants and what they showed first half against Geelong, I think they'll be a lot more difficult to beat than people realise, at least in the first half of the year.
Yeah, they'll walk down the race saying, I am the hunter.
But I'm tipping Adelaide. I don't think
Adelaide, definitely.
Do any funny
Don't muck
business
around.
with.
No.
The big game on Sunday afternoon, Carlton and St Kilda. This is a real swing game, isn't it? Real 50-50. I had a look at the markets early in the week, and the favouritism's fluctuated back and forth. So,
is that right?
Carlton got a few injuries. Adam Sard out. Jack Steele back for the Saints.
Yep.
Where are you going with this?
Well, I can't see Carlton beating St Kilda. I think St Kilda are a really good tip, even though it's a swing game. They get Steele back. They're in good form. They really pushed Collingwood, who admittedly were missing a few key players, but their system is really strong, really hard to score against. I know they've got Mackay and Kerner, and we say it every week, but they haven't got that spread of goal kickers that you need. And it was guys like Jack Ginnivan and Bobby Hill that bobbed up for Collingwood. I'm just really confident that with Steele back and Sard out, that tips the balance to the Saints.
And Tim Membry might also be back for
exactly
the Saints.
Right. And Kamenides out, which he really struggled against Darcy Moore, and I think Tim Membry will be able to put up a really good showing against Wiedering or someone like that, keep them occupied. Saints for mine.
I'll make it interesting. I'll tip Carlton, because I think last week, as bad as they were, I reckon this is a bit of a line in the sand game for them. They've got a lot to prove after last week. I think it's one of those games where they need to make a statement. They need to do something, and there's a bit more on the line for them. The Saints have been impressive, but I think in this competition it's just really hard to string 6 weeks together where you play good footy.
They play a tough,
very good for 5
and
weeks.
they play a tough brand. It's up and back,
and such an even comp. I just think maybe they could have an off week. I think I'd probably lean a bit more to Carlton. I still undecided as to whether the fact that they won those games with a midfield that wasn't firing, I'm not too sure whether that's a positive or a negative as yet.
I'll ask you this question, Rui. What would you say Carlton's record in line in the sand games has been over the last 10 years?
I think Carlton's record in the last 10 years is good anywhere.
A line in the
genre.
Sand game for Carlton as if they're going to actually, ooh.
But I think this one means
that is hilarious.
There's a lot riding on this, more than the 4 points. I think there's I've sensed a lot of disquiet amongst the Carlton community.
This is where I can feel myself tipping over into misguided arrogance after 8 in a row and really lob it in onto St Kilda. But good luck to you with Carlton. I hope you're right.
We'll go to the next game. Gold Coast Suns against North Melbourne, which doesn't seem like a game of much interest, but it's a game that they still give a tip, so we've got to give them a winner.
Well, if you talk about line in the sand games, as silly as it is, if Gold Coast lose this, it'd be an absolute disaster. But they won't. They'll win.
Todd Goldstein's 300th as well.
Yeah, I know. That's a great effort from Todd Goldstein. Playing in the ruck, playing 300 games is a fairly monumental effort. But Gold Coast, look, they should have won, could have against Fremantle, could have against Essendon, did against Geelong. They're a much better side at home, but they'll just beat North Melbourne.
Yeah, I think they're hard to beat at home. And I'm a bit different with Gold Coast. I think people underestimate how hard it is to build a team from scratch, which is pretty much what they've done. I know that first 5 years they probably didn't do all. They blew that up, I reckon, but their last 5 years, it takes a while to get those kids to 23, 24 for them to play good footy.
I agree with that, but it's just disappointing. They've been in winning positions in 2 of their last 3 games and haven't been able to do it.
Yeah, I think they'll win this week. I think they'll probably win quite comfortably. Monday night footy, Anzac Day Eve, the now traditional Anzac Day Eve between Melbourne and Richmond.
I must admit, when this first was muted years ago, I thought, they're trying to, muscle in on something that works beautifully, but it's been a really great addition to the calendar.
It probably helps that Melbourne have become a good team in that time as well.
Yeah, I'm tipping Melbourne to bounce back. They just look flat, and the reasons for it, obviously, they travelled. They were on a 6-day break, I think it was, and were on their way home, and they didn't fire a shot. It's the worst game I've seen Stephen May play, and they were without Max Gawn, who comes back this week in all likelihood. They'll get obviously better outputs from a few of Petraka and Viney, and they might get Jake Lever back, who's critical to that back line. So I think Melbourne can beat Richmond, who are just battling to get cohesion. They've got no capacity to have their best team on the park. They haven't had it on the park for a long time.
Yeah, I think with Richmond, we tend to give teams like them a bit more of a chance, bit more leeway because of what they've done in the past. But I mean, I don't want to be the person to write them off. But from what I've seen this year, they're a long way off it. And you could say, oh, they've got injuries, but when you get older, you just get injured. I don't think they're going to be at the point where I think for a lot of the year we've got to say, oh, they're a couple of weeks from getting this guy back, and then I don't think they'll ever get to the point where they have a fit list. I think Melbourne win, and I think they're probably my lock of the week. I think they'll win quite comfortably. Yeah,
well, apart from St Kilda, they're my lock of the week too.
And we finish off with the Anzac Day blockbuster Collingwood against Essendon. And this is the first time in, 20 years that they've both been good at the same time. Would it be right, Pete?
Yep, top four, both teams going into the Anzac Day game. Another really tough tip. I'm tipping Collingwood based on the fact that they've got, at least 26 weeks or 27 weeks of good form plus finals under Craig McRae. So you know what you're going to get. Whereas Essendon, this is a step up in class. Although they've been very good and they beat Melbourne, but there were reasons potentially for beating Melbourne. I'm tipping Collingwood, but I reckon it's a good tip if you want to try and make up ground to have a crack at Essendon, because Collingwood's got no ruckman. Nathan Kruger might play in the ruck, and Essendon's got two of the better ones, or most informed ones at the moment, Draper and Andrew Phillips. So, look, if you're leaning towards taking a punt, this is a good game to do it on, but I'm tipping Collingwood.
Yeah, I'm with you on Collingwood. I think their quality's still there. They've got a lot out, though, don't they? And similar to Sydney, sort of in that same area, the big men. So, really want to see what Nick Dacos can do, and more fascinated as to how Brad Scott will approach him as well. Whether he has a player to sit on him or
Mac Guelphy would have been great for him, but he's not playing, and it's hard to see who else. I reckon Jai Caldwell will probably get the job. He plays as a kind of a defensive forward, and he's good around stoppages. And I could see him putting a lot of pressure on Nick Dacos, just whether Dacos will get him in transition.
But we're tipping Collingwood.
We're both tipping Collingwood, but as I said, there's my roughie for the round.
Well, on that note, that's all for today. Thanks for joining us. Make sure to subscribe, rate and review wherever you get your podcasts. We'd love to hear from you via email, realfootypod@theage.com.au. Check out the rest of the expert tips at theage.com.au/AFL. Thanks for listening. The podcast will be back next week on Wednesday at the end of the mega long Anzac round. We'll catch you then, and may your team get up.